Tonight, we're going to explore one of the most enduring puzzles in American history. A story that has captivated minds for over 6 decades and continues to spark debate in coffee shops, classrooms, and conspiracy forums across the globe. Picture this. It's a crisp November afternoon in Dallas, Texas, 1963. The sun is shining, crowds are gathering along the streets, and the excitement in the air is palpable. President John F. Kennedy, young, charismatic, and full of promise, is riding through Dealey Plaza in an open-top limousine, waving to the cheering masses. In just a few seconds, everything would change forever, not just for America, but for how we understand truth, power, and the stories we tell ourselves about our leaders. What happened that day has been dissected, analyzed, and debated more than perhaps any single event in modern history. Yet somehow, the more we learn, the more questions seem to arise. Recently, in March 2025, nearly 80,000 pages of previously classified documents were released to the public, reigniting conversations that many thought had been settled decades ago. But here's the thing about mysteries that refuse to die. They often hold secrets that go deeper than we initially imagined. Tonight, as you settle into your most comfortable position, we're going to take a gentle journey through the labyrinth of evidence, theories, and unanswered questions surrounding the assassination of President Kennedy. This isn't about sensationalism or wild speculation. Instead, we'll methodically examine the facts, the inconsistencies, and the curious details that have kept researchers, historians, and ordinary citizens searching for answers all these years. You might be wondering why this story continues to fascinate us. Why, after all this time, do we still find ourselves drawn to the events of that November day? The answer lies not just in what happened, but in what it represents about power, secrecy, and the delicate relationship between citizens and their government. The Kennedy assassination sits at the intersection of history and mystery, where official narratives meet persistent doubts, and where the search for truth becomes a mirror reflecting our deepest concerns about the institutions we trust. But before we dive into the depths of this investigation, let me share something that might surprise you. This isn't just a story about one man's death or even one nation's trauma. It's a story about how information flows, how narratives are constructed, and how the human mind processes events that challenge our understanding of reality. The conspiracy theories surrounding JFK's assassination didn't emerge in a vacuum. They arose from genuine inconsistencies, from questions that seemed to have no satisfactory answers, and from a growing awareness that the official version of events might not tell the complete story. Over the next hour or so, we'll explore the evidence that has kept this mystery alive. We'll examine the Warren Commission's findings, the alternative theories that emerged, the scientific analyses that followed, and the cultural impact that continues to ripple through American society today. We'll look at the ballistics evidence, the medical testimony, the witness accounts, and the photographs that have been scrutinized frame by frame for over 60 years. What makes this story particularly compelling is how it evolved over time. In the immediate aftermath of the assassination, most Americans accepted the official explanation. Lee Harvey Oswald, acting alone, killed the president with 3 shots from the 6th floor of the Texas School Book Depository. But as years passed and more information emerged, doubts began to surface. Witnesses came forward with accounts that didn't quite match the official timeline. Medical professionals raised questions about the wounds. Film footage revealed details that seemed inconsistent with the single gunman theory. The release of the Zapruder film to the public in 1975 marked a turning point in how Americans viewed the assassination. For the first time, ordinary citizens could see the brutal reality of those few seconds in Dealey Plaza. They could watch the president's head snap backward and to the left, a movement that seemed to contradict the idea that he was shot from behind. They could count the seconds between shots and question whether one gunman could have fired so rapidly and accurately. But this story isn't just about ballistics and trajectories. It's about the broader context in which the assassination occurred. The early 1960s were a time of tremendous change and tension in America. The Cold War was at its peak. The civil rights movement was gaining momentum, and the Bay of Pigs invasion had strained relationships between the Kennedy administration and various government agencies. Understanding these dynamics is crucial to understanding why alternative theories about the assassination gained such traction. As we embark on this exploration together, I want you to approach it with an open but critical mind. We'll examine evidence from multiple perspectives, consider various theories, and try to understand why certain explanations have resonated with different groups of people. We're not here to convince you of any particular version of events, but rather to guide you through the complexities of this enduring mystery in a way that's both informative and relaxing. The beauty of exploring historical mysteries like this one is that they allow us to exercise our analytical thinking while also appreciating the nuances of human experience. Every witness who was in Dealey Plaza that day saw events through their own unique perspective. Every investigator who examined the evidence brought their own expertise and biases to the task. Every theorist who proposed an alternative explanation was responding to genuine questions that deserved serious consideration. Tonight's journey will take us through the key moments and pieces of evidence that have shaped our understanding of November 22, 1963. We'll start with the basic facts that everyone agrees upon. President Kennedy was killed while riding in a motorcade through Dallas. Lee Harvey Oswald was arrested and charged with the crime. Jack Ruby shot and killed Oswald 2 days later while he was in police custody. From there, we'll explore the areas where consensus breaks down and controversy begins. We'll examine the famous magic bullet theory, which suggests that a single bullet caused multiple wounds in both President Kennedy and Texas Governor John Connally. We'll look at the acoustic evidence that some researchers believe proves there was a fourth shot, indicating a second gunman. We'll consider the medical evidence, including the autopsy photographs and X-rays that have been the subject of intense debate among forensic experts. But we'll also go beyond the technical details to explore the human elements of this story. We'll talk about the witnesses whose testimonies were sometimes ignored or dismissed. We'll discuss the investigators who dedicated their lives to uncovering the truth. We'll examine how the media coverage of the assassination and its aftermath shaped public perception and influenced the development of various theories. One of the most fascinating aspects of the JFK assassination conspiracy is how it has evolved and adapted over the decades. Early theories focused primarily on the possibility of a second gunman in Dealey Plaza. Later theories expanded to include suggestions of involvement by organized crime, anti-Castro Cuban exiles, or elements within the U.S. government itself. Each new piece of evidence, each newly released document, each reanalysis of existing materials has added new layers to the discussion. The recent release of classified documents in 2025 has provided fresh material for researchers and conspiracy theorists alike. These documents, while heavily redacted in many cases, offer new insights into the CIA's surveillance activities, Oswald's background and movements, and the various investigations that followed the assassination. They also reveal the extent to which government agencies were aware of the public's growing skepticism about the official explanation. As we settle in for this exploration, remember that the goal isn't to solve the mystery definitively. After more than 60 years of investigation by professional researchers, amateur sleuths, government commissions, and independent experts, it's unlikely that any single analysis will provide all the answers. Instead, our goal is to understand the mystery itself, why it persists, what it tells us about the nature of truth and evidence, and how it reflects broader themes in American culture and society. The story of the JFK assassination conspiracy is ultimately a story about the search for truth in a complex world. It's about the tension between official explanations and personal skepticism. It's about the role of evidence in shaping our beliefs and the ways in which those beliefs can be influenced by factors beyond the facts themselves. It's about the human need to make sense of traumatic events and the sometimes contradictory impulses to accept comforting explanations and to dig deeper for hidden truths. So as we begin this journey together, take a deep breath and let your mind settle into a state of curious contemplation. We're about to explore one of the most thoroughly documented yet persistently mysterious events in modern history. Along the way, we'll encounter fascinating characters, compelling evidence, troubling inconsistencies, and thought-provoking questions that continue to challenge our understanding of what really happened on that fateful day in Dallas. The assassination of President Kennedy was a watershed moment that changed how Americans viewed their government, their media, and their understanding of historical truth. The conspiracy theories that emerged in its aftermath weren't just about one event, but about the broader questions of power, secrecy, and accountability in a democratic society. Tonight, we'll explore how those questions have evolved and why they continue to resonate with people around the world. Let's begin our deeper examination by stepping into the shoes of those who were there that November day. Imagine yourself standing along the parade route, perhaps near the grassy knoll or along Elm Street, watching history unfold before your eyes. The anticipation in the crowd is electric. Children are perched on their parents' shoulders, office workers have stepped out from their buildings, and everyone is craning their necks to catch a glimpse of the young president and his glamorous wife. The motorcade is running slightly behind schedule, which actually worked in favor of many spectators who were still arriving. Abraham Zapruder, a local dress manufacturer, had almost decided not to bring his 8mm camera that day, but his secretary convinced him otherwise. That decision would result in the most analyzed 26 seconds of film in history, a piece of evidence that would both illuminate and complicate our understanding of what happened. As the president's limousine made the slow turn from Houston Street onto Elm Street, traveling at approximately 11 miles per hour, everything seemed perfectly normal. Secret Service agents were positioned according to standard protocol. Governor Connally and his wife Nellie were seated in the jump seats directly in front of the president and Mrs. Kennedy. The weather was clear, the crowd was enthusiastic, and Dallas was showing its best face to the visiting dignitaries. What happened next has been reconstructed second by second, frame by frame, through countless investigations. At approximately 12:30 p.m. Central Standard Time, shots rang out across Dealey Plaza. The Warren Commission would later conclude that 3 shots were fired over a period of approximately 8.3 seconds. But even this seemingly basic fact has been the subject of intense debate, with acoustic evidence suggesting the possibility of a 4th shot and alternative timelines proposed by various researchers. The first shot, according to the official investigation, missed the limousine entirely. Some witnesses reported hearing what they thought was a firecracker or a motorcycle backfiring. This shot allegedly struck the pavement near the limousine, sending up a small spray of concrete that may have slightly wounded a bystander named James Tague, who was standing under the triple underpass. The second shot in the Warren Commission's reconstruction was the one that would become known as the magic bullet. This single bullet, Commission Exhibit 399, allegedly entered President Kennedy's back, exited through his throat, then continued on to strike Governor Connally, causing multiple wounds to his back, chest, wrist, and thigh before coming to rest on a stretcher at Parkland Hospital in nearly pristine condition. The third and final shot, the one clearly visible in the Zapruder film, struck the president in the head, causing the massive trauma that proved fatal. This is the shot that most people remember when they think of the assassination, the moment when the president's head snaps violently backward and to the left, a movement that has sparked decades of debate about the direction from which the shot was fired. But let's pause here and consider what the witnesses actually experienced in those chaotic moments. Mary Moorman was taking a Polaroid photograph just as the fatal shot was fired. Jean Hill, standing next to her, would later claim she saw a man running behind the grassy knoll immediately after the shooting. S.M. Holland, a railroad worker standing on the triple underpass, reported seeing smoke coming from behind the wooden fence on the grassy knoll. These witness accounts, along with dozens of others collected in the hours and days following the assassination, painted a picture that didn't always align neatly with the single gunman theory. Some witnesses reported hearing shots from different directions. Others described seeing suspicious individuals in the area before and after the shooting. Still others reported observing law enforcement officers who didn't seem to be following standard protocols. The acoustic landscape of Dealey Plaza that day has been reconstructed through extensive analysis. The shape of the plaza, with its concrete structures and open spaces, would have created specific echo patterns that could have confused witnesses about the direction and number of shots. The Warren Commission took this into account, but critics have argued that the acoustic evidence actually supports the presence of a second gunman. In 1978, the House Select Committee on Assassinations commissioned a detailed acoustic analysis of a police radio transmission that was allegedly recorded during the shooting. This analysis suggested the presence of a fourth shot fired from the grassy knoll area, which would have indicated a conspiracy. However, this finding was later challenged by other experts who argued that the sounds on the recording were not gunshots at all, but rather other noises that occurred after the assassination. The medical evidence has been equally contentious. The emergency room physicians at Parkland Hospital, who first treated President Kennedy, described his throat wound as an entrance wound, which would be consistent with a shot from the front. However, the autopsy performed at Bethesda Naval Hospital concluded that this was an exit wound, supporting the theory that the shot came from behind. Dr. Malcolm Perry, who performed the tracheostomy on President Kennedy, initially described the throat wound as appearing to be an entrance wound. However, he later clarified that he was not making a definitive determination about the direction of the bullet, only describing the appearance of the wound as he observed it. This distinction became crucial in later investigations, as the interpretation of the medical evidence played a significant role in supporting or challenging various theories about the assassination. The autopsy itself has been the subject of extensive controversy. The photographs and X-rays taken during the procedure were not released to the public for many years, and when they were finally made available, they raised new questions rather than settling existing ones. Some medical experts who examined the materials years later claimed to see evidence of wounds that were inconsistent with the official explanation. Others argued that the available evidence clearly supported the Warren Commission's conclusions. The chain of custody for crucial pieces of evidence has also been questioned. The president's brain, which was removed during the autopsy for further examination, reportedly went missing and has never been recovered. This loss has fueled speculation about what additional evidence might have been revealed through more detailed analysis of the brain tissue. Commission Exhibit 399, the so-called magic bullet, has been subjected to extensive ballistic testing over the years. Supporters of the single bullet theory point to computer simulations and trajectory analyses that demonstrate how such a bullet path could be possible. Critics argue that the bullet's near-pristine condition is inconsistent with having caused the extensive damage described in the official account. The bullet was allegedly found on a stretcher at Parkland Hospital, but there has been confusion about exactly which stretcher it was found on and who discovered it. This uncertainty has led some researchers to question whether the bullet was planted as evidence, or whether it was genuinely connected to the assassination at all. Beyond the physical evidence, the investigation into Lee Harvey Oswald's background has revealed a complex web of connections that have fueled conspiracy theories for decades. Oswald's time in the Soviet Union, his attempted defection, his activities with pro-Castro and anti-Castro groups, and his connections to various intelligence agencies have all been scrutinized extensively. The Warren Commission concluded that Oswald acted alone, motivated by a complex mix of personal and political grievances. However, later investigations revealed that the Commission had not been given access to all relevant information about Oswald's background and activities. The CIA, FBI, and other agencies withheld certain details about their surveillance of Oswald, leading to questions about what else might have been hidden from investigators. Oswald's own statements during his brief time in custody have been analyzed extensively. He denied shooting the president and claimed that he was a patsy, a statement that has been interpreted in various ways by different researchers. Some see it as evidence of his innocence, while others view it as an attempt to deflect responsibility or as part of a larger deception. The circumstances surrounding Oswald's death have added another layer of mystery to the case. Jack Ruby's shooting of Oswald in the basement of the Dallas Police Department eliminated the possibility of a trial that might have revealed additional information about the assassination. Ruby's connections to organized crime figures and his own statements about his motivations have been the subject of extensive investigation and speculation. Ruby claimed that he shot Oswald to spare Mrs. Kennedy the ordeal of a trial, but investigators have questioned whether this explanation fully accounts for his actions. Some researchers have suggested that Ruby was silencing Oswald to prevent him from revealing information about a larger conspiracy. Others have argued that Ruby's actions were impulsive and driven by genuine emotional reaction to the president's death. The investigation into Ruby's background revealed connections to various underworld figures, but the significance of these connections has been debated. The Warren Commission concluded that Ruby had no significant ties to organized crime that would indicate involvement in a conspiracy to kill the president. However, later investigations by the House Select Committee on Assassinations found that Ruby had more extensive connections to organized crime figures than previously acknowledged. The cultural impact of the assassination conspiracy theories extends far beyond the specific details of what happened in Dallas. The Kennedy assassination marked a turning point in American trust in government institutions. Prior to November 22, 1963, polls showed that a large majority of Americans trusted their government to do the right thing most of the time. In the decades following the assassination, that trust steadily eroded, particularly as more information emerged about government secrecy and deception in other areas. The assassination also coincided with the rise of television as the dominant form of mass media. For the first time in history, a traumatic national event was broadcast live into American homes, creating a shared experience that was both immediate and lasting. The images of that weekend, from the initial reports of the shooting to the funeral procession, became seared into the collective memory of a generation. This media coverage also contributed to the development of conspiracy theories. As television news expanded its coverage and began to examine events in greater detail, inconsistencies and unanswered questions became more apparent to the general public. The medium that had initially helped establish the official narrative of the assassination also became the vehicle through which that narrative was challenged and questioned. The emergence of alternative theories about the assassination was not immediate. In the days and weeks following November 22nd, most Americans accepted the explanation that Oswald had acted alone. However, as more information became available and as researchers began to examine the evidence more closely, doubts began to surface. Books like Mark Lane's Rush to Judgment and Edward J. Epstein's Inquest raised serious questions about the Warren Commission's methodology and conclusions. These early critics of the official investigation were not fringe conspiracy theorists, but respected researchers, attorneys, and journalists who had identified genuine problems with the evidence and the investigative process. Their work helped establish conspiracy research as a legitimate field of inquiry, even as it also opened the door for more speculative and less rigorous theories. The House Select Committee on Assassinations, which reinvestigated the case in the late 1970s, represented an attempt to address some of these concerns through a more thorough and transparent investigation. While the committee ultimately concluded that President Kennedy was probably assassinated as a result of a conspiracy, it was unable to identify the other gunmen or the nature of the conspiracy. This conclusion, reached by an official government investigation, lent credibility to conspiracy theories while simultaneously failing to provide definitive answers. The committee's work demonstrated that questions about the assassination were legitimate and deserving of serious investigation, but it also highlighted the challenges involved in reconstructing events that occurred more than a decade earlier. The ongoing release of classified documents related to the assassination has provided new material for researchers while also revealing the extent to which information was withheld from earlier investigations. Each new release has generated renewed interest in the case and has sometimes provided support for various theories, though rarely in a definitive way. The 2025 document release, prompted by public pressure and political promises, has continued this pattern. While the documents have provided new insights into government surveillance activities and investigative procedures, they have not resolved the fundamental questions that have driven conspiracy theories for over 60 years. Instead, they have added new details to an already complex narrative, creating additional avenues for research and speculation. The psychological dimension of conspiracy theories surrounding the Kennedy assassination reveals something profound about how human minds process traumatic events that challenge our understanding of reality. When faced with an event as shocking and consequential as the death of a beloved president, our minds naturally seek patterns, explanations, and meaning that can help us make sense of what seems senseless. This psychological component isn't unique to the Kennedy assassination, but the case exemplifies it perfectly. The idea that a lone gunman with a mail-order rifle could single-handedly alter the course of history feels disproportionate to many people. There's something deeply unsettling about the notion that such a momentous event could result from such seemingly random circumstances. This psychological discomfort has contributed to the persistent appeal of theories that suggest larger, more coordinated forces were at work. The concept of proportionality plays a significant role in how people evaluate explanations for major events. We tend to believe that big effects should have big causes. The assassination of a president, with all its far-reaching consequences for American society and foreign policy, seems to demand an explanation that matches its magnitude. A conspiracy involving multiple shooters, government agencies, or organized crime feels more proportionate to the scale of the outcome than the actions of a single disturbed individual. This tendency isn't necessarily irrational. Throughout history, many significant events have indeed resulted from complex conspiracies and coordinated efforts. The human ability to detect patterns and suspect hidden connections has served our species well in navigating dangerous and deceptive environments. However, this same ability can sometimes lead us to see patterns where none exist, or to prefer complex explanations when simpler ones might be more accurate. The role of confirmation bias in shaping beliefs about the assassination cannot be understated. Once someone begins to suspect that the official explanation is incomplete or inaccurate, they tend to interpret new information in ways that support their existing beliefs. Evidence that contradicts their theory may be dismissed or explained away, while evidence that seems to support it is embraced enthusiastically, even if that evidence is ambiguous or incomplete. This dynamic has been clearly visible in the decades of research and debate surrounding the assassination. Researchers on different sides of various theories have looked at the same evidence and reached dramatically different conclusions. The Zapruder film, for instance, has been interpreted as proof of everything from a single gunman firing from the rear to multiple shooters positioned around the plaza. The same medical evidence has been used to support contradictory theories about the number and direction of shots. The evolution of technology has added new dimensions to this analysis while also creating new opportunities for confirmation bias. Computer simulations can model bullet trajectories with incredible precision, but the results depend heavily on the assumptions built into the models. Digital enhancement of photographs and film footage can reveal new details, but it can also introduce artifacts that may be misinterpreted as evidence. Audio analysis can detect sounds that were previously inaudible, but determining what those sounds actually represent requires subjective interpretation. The internet age has dramatically transformed how conspiracy theories develop and spread. In the pre-internet era, researchers working on alternative theories about the assassination often worked in isolation, communicating primarily through books, magazines, and occasional conferences. Today, researchers can instantly share findings, collaborate across continents, and build upon each other's work in real time. This has accelerated the pace of research and analysis, but it has also made it easier for misleading or inaccurate information to spread rapidly. Social media platforms have created echo chambers where people with similar beliefs about the assassination can reinforce each other's theories without encountering significant challenges to their assumptions. This can lead to the development of increasingly elaborate and complex theories that may drift further and further from the available evidence. At the same time, these platforms have also enabled more rigorous researchers to fact-check claims quickly and to expose false or misleading information. The phenomenon of crowdsourcing has brought thousands of amateur researchers into the investigation of the Kennedy assassination. Online forums dedicated to the case feature detailed discussions of ballistics, medical evidence, witness testimony, and photographic analysis. Some of these amateur researchers have made genuinely valuable contributions to our understanding of the case. identifying previously overlooked details or connections that professional investigators had missed. However, the democratization of research has also led to the proliferation of theories based on incomplete understanding of the evidence or flawed analytical methods. The accessibility of information has made it possible for anyone to become an assassination researcher, but not everyone who takes on this role has the necessary background in forensics, ballistics, medicine, or investigative methodology to evaluate evidence appropriately. The release of classified documents over the years has provided fuel for both professional researchers and amateur theorists. Each new batch of documents is scrutinized intensively for clues that might support various theories about what really happened. The 2025 release was no exception, with researchers poring over thousands of pages looking for previously unknown details about Oswald's background, CIA activities, and the various investigations that followed the assassination. These document releases have revealed the extent to which government agencies were monitoring the development of conspiracy theories and public opinion about the assassination. Internal memos show that officials were aware of growing public skepticism about the Warren Commission's conclusions and were concerned about the potential impact of this skepticism on public trust in government institutions. The documents also reveal the challenges that investigators faced in trying to piece together a complete picture of events. Intelligence agencies often operated with incomplete information, competing priorities, and institutional barriers to sharing information. The complexity of Oswald's background, with his connections to various political groups and his travel to the Soviet Union, created a web of relationships and activities that was difficult to fully understand even with extensive investigation. One of the most significant aspects of the newly released documents is what they reveal about the CIA's surveillance of Oswald before the assassination. The agency was clearly aware of his activities and movements, but the extent of this surveillance and whether it might have prevented the assassination has been a subject of intense debate. Some researchers argue that the level of surveillance suggests that Oswald was working as an intelligence asset, while others contend that the monitoring was routine for someone with his background and activities. The documents also shed new light on the various investigations that followed the assassination. They reveal tensions between different agencies, disagreements about investigative priorities, and concerns about protecting sources and methods. This behind-the-scenes look at the investigative process helps explain some of the inconsistencies and gaps in the public record that have fueled conspiracy theories over the years. But perhaps most importantly, the documents demonstrate the genuine complexity of the events surrounding the assassination. They show that even with extensive resources and access to classified information, investigators struggled to answer all the questions raised by the case. This complexity doesn't necessarily support any particular conspiracy theory, but it does help explain why so many questions have remained unanswered for so long. The international dimension of the Kennedy assassination has received less attention than domestic conspiracy theories, but it adds another layer of complexity to the case. The Cold War context in which the assassination occurred created a situation where foreign intelligence agencies, anti-Castro groups, and pro-Castro sympathizers all had potential motives for wanting to harm the president or influence American policy. Oswald's time in the Soviet Union and his apparent sympathies for the Castro regime in Cuba raised immediate questions about whether foreign governments might have been involved in the assassination. The Warren Commission investigated these possibilities, but concluded that there was no evidence of foreign involvement. However, critics have argued that the Commission's investigation of international connections was inadequate, and that important leads were not pursued sufficiently. The House Select Committee on Assassinations took a more thorough approach to investigating potential foreign connections, but it too concluded that there was no evidence of involvement by foreign governments. However, the committee did find that anti-Castro Cuban groups had the means, motive, and opportunity to have been involved in the assassination, though it found no evidence that they actually were involved. The role of organized crime in the assassination has been another persistent area of investigation and speculation. The Kennedy administration's aggressive pursuit of organized crime figures, combined with allegations about the CIA's use of mob figures in plots against Castro, created a complex web of relationships that some researchers believe could have led to the president's assassination. Jack Ruby's connections to various underworld figures have been extensively documented, and some researchers have argued that these connections suggest he was part of a larger conspiracy to silence Oswald. The House Select Committee on Assassinations found that organized crime groups had the motive and means to assassinate the president, but it found no evidence that they actually did so. The committee's conclusion was based partly on the lack of credible evidence linking organized crime figures to the assassination and partly on the assessment that such groups would not have risked the massive law enforcement response that would inevitably follow the killing of a president. However, critics of this conclusion argue that the committee underestimated both the capabilities of organized crime groups and their willingness to take extreme risks when their survival was threatened. The medical evidence in the Kennedy assassination case continues to be one of the most contentious areas of debate. The discrepancies between the observations of the emergency room physicians at Parkland Hospital and the findings of the autopsy at Bethesda Naval Hospital have never been fully resolved to everyone's satisfaction. Dr. Charles Crenshaw, who was present during the emergency treatment of President Kennedy, wrote a book years later in which he maintained that the wounds he observed were consistent with shots from the front, contradicting the official conclusion that all shots came from behind. However, other physicians who were present have disputed Dr. Crenshaw's recollections, and medical experts have argued that the apparent discrepancies can be explained by the different perspectives and circumstances under which the wounds were observed. The autopsy photographs and X-rays have been subjected to extensive analysis by multiple panels of medical experts over the years. While most of these experts have concluded that the evidence supports the finding that President Kennedy was shot from behind, some have raised questions about specific aspects of the wounds or the quality of the autopsy itself. The controversy surrounding the medical evidence has been complicated by the fact that the autopsy was performed by military pathologists who had limited experience with gunshot wounds, rather than by forensic pathologists who specialized in such cases. Critics have argued that this inexperience led to errors in the autopsy that have made it more difficult to determine exactly what happened. The handling of the president's body and the chain of custody for the autopsy materials have also been subjects of controversy. The decision to transport the body to Bethesda Naval Hospital, rather than allowing the autopsy to be performed in Dallas, where Texas law required it to be done, has been cited by some researchers as evidence of a cover-up. However, others have argued that this decision was made for security reasons and to ensure that the autopsy was performed in a controlled environment. The photographic evidence from Dealey Plaza has been analyzed more intensively than perhaps any other visual record in history. The Zapruder film, in particular, has been examined frame by frame, enhanced digitally, and subjected to various forms of technical analysis. Every shadow, every movement, and every detail visible in the film has been scrutinized for clues about what happened during those crucial seconds. Other photographs taken that day, including those by professional photographers and amateur spectators, have also been studied extensively. Some researchers claim to have identified suspicious figures in various photographs, including individuals who might have been additional gunmen or coordinators of a conspiracy. However, the identification of specific individuals in old photographs is often subjective and prone to error. The acoustic evidence remains one of the most technically complex aspects of the case. The 1978 analysis that suggested a fourth shot was based on sophisticated audio processing techniques that were cutting edge for their time. However, later reanalysis using more advanced techniques and different methodological approaches has called the original conclusions into question. The debate over the acoustic evidence illustrates a broader challenge in analyzing technical evidence from historical events. As technology advances, it becomes possible to extract more information from old recordings, photographs, and other materials. However, new analytical techniques can also reveal artifacts or anomalies that may be misinterpreted as evidence of something they're not. The ballistics evidence has been similarly controversial. Extensive testing has been conducted on rifles similar to the one allegedly used by Oswald, and various experts have reached different conclusions about whether the shots described in the Warren Commission's reconstruction were feasible. Some marksmen have successfully replicated the shooting scenario under controlled conditions, while others have argued that the shots would have been extremely difficult or impossible to make. The condition of the bullets and bullet fragments recovered from the scene has been another area of debate. Commission Exhibit 399, the nearly intact bullet allegedly responsible for multiple wounds, has been subjected to extensive analysis. Supporters of the single bullet theory argue that the bullet's condition is consistent with having passed through soft tissue without hitting any major bones. Critics contend that the bullet should have been more deformed if it had caused all the damage attributed to it. The trajectory analysis that supports the single bullet theory has been refined over the years using computer modeling and three-dimensional reconstruction techniques. These analyses have generally supported the conclusion that a single bullet could have caused the wounds to both President Kennedy and Governor Connally, given the positions of the two men in the limousine. However, critics of the single bullet theory argue that the computer models are based on assumptions about the exact positions of the president and governor that may not be accurate. Small changes in these assumptions can significantly alter the trajectory calculations and the feasibility of the single bullet scenario. The timeline of events in Dealey Plaza has been reconstructed using multiple sources of evidence, including the Zapruder film, other photographic and film records, witness testimony, and audio recordings. This reconstruction has established a fairly precise chronology of the shooting, but there remain disputes about specific timing details that can be crucial to evaluating different theories about what happened. The speed of the presidential limousine during the shooting has been calculated based on analysis of the Zapruder film and other evidence. This speed is important for determining how much time elapsed between shots, and whether a single gunman could have fired multiple rounds in the available time. Most analyses conclude that the limousine was traveling at approximately 11 miles per hour during the shooting, but some researchers have argued for slightly different speeds that could affect the feasibility of various shooting scenarios. The reactions of the people in the limousine, particularly Governor Connally's delayed reaction to being wounded, have been cited by both supporters and critics of the single bullet theory. Supporters argue that the governor's delayed reaction is consistent with the known effects of shock and adrenaline on the perception of gunshot wounds. Critics contend that the timing of his reaction indicates that he was hit by a separate bullet fired after the one that wounded the president. As we continue to examine these intricate details and persistent questions, it becomes clear that the Kennedy assassination represents more than just a historical mystery. It embodies the challenges we face as a society in determining truth from evidence, in distinguishing between legitimate skepticism and unfounded speculation, and in maintaining faith in institutions while holding them accountable for transparency and honesty. The legacy of November 22, 1963, extends far beyond the specific questions about what happened in Dealey Plaza. It represents a turning point in American consciousness, a moment when the relationship between citizens and their government began to change in fundamental ways. The conspiracy theories that emerged from this event weren't just about one man's death, but about broader questions of power, secrecy, and democracy that continue to resonate today. Tonight, as we've journeyed through this labyrinth of evidence and theory together, we've seen how the search for truth can be both illuminating and frustrating, how the same facts can be interpreted in multiple ways, and how the passage of time can both clarify and complicate our understanding of historical events. The Kennedy assassination conspiracy serves as a reminder that in a complex world, simple answers are often elusive, and the most important questions may be the ones that resist easy resolution. As we move deeper into the autumn of 1963, we need to understand the broader landscape that surrounded President Kennedy in those final months of his life. The political climate was shifting in ways that would prove significant to how people later interpreted the events in Dallas. Kennedy's relationship with various government agencies had become increasingly strained, particularly with the CIA following the Bay of Pigs disaster and his growing reluctance to escalate American involvement in Vietnam. The president had made powerful enemies during his brief time in office. His brother Robert's aggressive pursuit of organized crime figures as Attorney General had created tensions with underworld leaders who had previously enjoyed relative immunity from federal prosecution. The administration's handling of civil rights issues had angered segregationists in the South, while their cautious approach frustrated civil rights activists who wanted faster progress. Meanwhile, Kennedy's attempts at détente with the Soviet Union had drawn criticism from military leaders and intelligence officials who favored a more confrontational approach to the Cold War. This complex web of relationships and tensions would later provide fertile ground for conspiracy theories. When researchers began examining who might have benefited from Kennedy's death, they found no shortage of potential suspects with apparent motives for wanting the president removed from office. This abundance of possible conspirators has been both a strength and a weakness of alternative theories about the assassination. The summer of 1963 had seen several events that would later take on new significance in light of the assassination. Kennedy's famous peace speech at American University in June, in which he called for a nuclear test ban treaty with the Soviet Union, had been praised by Premier Khrushchev, but criticized by hardliners in both countries. The president's decision to support the civil rights movement more openly, culminating in his televised address following the confrontation at the University of Alabama, had further polarized his support. Perhaps most significantly, Kennedy had begun to express private doubts about the wisdom of continued American involvement in Vietnam. He had authorized the overthrow of South Vietnamese President Ngo Dinh Diem just 3 weeks before his own death, a decision that would later fuel speculation about whether his changing views on Vietnam might have motivated his assassination. Some researchers have argued that Kennedy was planning to withdraw American advisors from Vietnam after the 1964 election, a move that would have threatened the interests of military contractors and intelligence agencies committed to expanding the conflict. The trip to Texas itself had political motivations that would later seem ominous to conspiracy theorists. Kennedy needed to heal divisions within the Democratic Party in Texas, where conservative and liberal factions were engaged in bitter infighting. The president's approval ratings had been declining, and he needed to shore up support in key states before the 1964 election. The decision to travel in an open car through Dallas, despite security concerns, was made partly to project an image of accessibility and confidence. The route through Dealey Plaza had been published in local newspapers, making it possible for anyone to know exactly where and when the president would be vulnerable. This advanced publicity has been cited by conspiracy theorists as evidence that the assassination was planned by individuals with inside knowledge of the motorcade route. However, supporters of the lone gunman theory point out that such publicity was standard practice for presidential visits, and that Oswald worked in a building along the published route. The security arrangements for the Dallas trip have been scrutinized extensively over the years. The Secret Service had reduced the number of agents riding on the presidential limousine, a decision that was later criticized as having made the president more vulnerable. The agency had also failed to secure all the buildings along the motorcade route, though such comprehensive security would have been virtually impossible given the resources available at the time. Weather conditions on November 22nd played a crucial role in the day's events. The morning had been rainy, which would have required the use of the presidential limousine's bulletproof bubble top. However, the skies cleared by the time the motorcade began, leading to the decision to remove the protective covering. This seemingly minor weather-related choice has been the subject of much speculation, with some researchers suggesting that the timing was too convenient to be coincidental. The social and cultural context of Dallas in 1963 also provided important background for understanding the assassination. The city had a reputation for political extremism, particularly right-wing sentiment that was hostile to Kennedy's policies. Just a month before the president's visit, United Nations Ambassador Adlai Stevenson had been physically attacked by protesters in Dallas. This incident had led some Kennedy advisors to recommend canceling the Texas trip, but the president had decided to proceed. The political atmosphere in Dallas was charged with tension over various issues, including civil rights, foreign policy, and federal authority. Leaflets had been distributed around the city before Kennedy's arrival, some depicting the president as a traitor and calling for his impeachment. While this extreme rhetoric was not uncommon in certain political circles at the time, it created an environment where violence against the president might have seemed justified to unstable individuals. Lee Harvey Oswald's background becomes even more intriguing when examined in detail. his defection to the Soviet Union in 1959 as a teenager, his marriage to a Russian woman, and his eventual return to the United States with surprising ease have all been subjects of intense scrutiny. The ease with which he was able to re-enter the country after attempting to renounce his American citizenship has led some researchers to suspect that he was working as an intelligence asset, either for the CIA or another agency. Oswald's activities in New Orleans during the summer of 1963 have been particularly puzzling to investigators. He was simultaneously involved with both pro-Castro and anti-Castro groups, a seemingly contradictory pattern that has never been fully explained. His arrest in August 1963 following a street altercation over his pro-Castro leafleting brought him to the attention of local FBI agents who interviewed him while he was in jail. The FBI's file on Oswald, which began before his defection to the Soviet Union, reveals that he was under surveillance by multiple agencies. However, the extent of this surveillance and whether it included active recruitment as an informant or agent remains unclear. Some former intelligence officers have claimed that Oswald was indeed working for American intelligence agencies, while others have dismissed such claims as unfounded speculation. Oswald's employment at the Texas School Book Depository, from which the shots were allegedly fired, has also been examined for signs of planning or coordination. He had obtained the job just 6 weeks before the assassination, apparently through a referral from a neighbor. The timing of his employment there, given that the building overlooked the motorcade route, has seemed suspicious to some researchers, though supporters of the lone gunman theory point out that the motorcade route was not finalized until after Oswald was already working there. The rifle allegedly used in the assassination, a 6.5mm Mannlicher Carcano that Oswald had purchased by mail order using an alias, has been the subject of extensive ballistic testing. The weapon was not considered particularly accurate by firearms experts, leading to questions about whether it could have been used to accomplish the shooting described in the Warren Commission's reconstruction. However, subsequent testing under controlled conditions has demonstrated that the rifle was capable of the accuracy required, particularly at the relatively short range involved. The telescopic sight mounted on the rifle was misaligned, according to FBI testing, which would have made accurate shooting more difficult. This misalignment has been cited by some researchers as evidence that Oswald could not have been the shooter, since a skilled marksman would have tested and adjusted his weapon before attempting such an important mission. However, others have argued that the misalignment was minor and could have been compensated for by an experienced shooter familiar with the weapon. Oswald's marksmanship abilities have been debated extensively, with different assessments of his skills as a rifleman. His military records show that he qualified as a sharpshooter on one occasion and as a marksman on another, indicating reasonable but not exceptional shooting ability. Former Marines who served with him have given conflicting accounts of his abilities, with some describing him as a poor shot and others recalling him as competent with a rifle. The forensic evidence from Dealey Plaza has been subjected to increasingly sophisticated analysis as technology has advanced. The bloodstain patterns in the presidential limousine, the bullet fragments recovered from the scene, and the damage to the vehicle itself have all been examined using modern forensic techniques. These analyses have generally supported the conclusions of the Warren Commission, though they have also revealed new details that have kept the debate alive. The photographic evidence has been enhanced and analyzed using digital techniques that were not available to earlier investigators. These enhancements have revealed previously invisible details in some images, while also raising new questions about other aspects of the visual record. The interpretation of enhanced images remains subjective, however, and different researchers have reached different conclusions about what the enhanced photographs actually show. The witness testimony from Dealey Plaza has been compiled and analyzed in numerous ways over the years. The House Select Committee on Assassinations conducted extensive interviews with witnesses who had not been questioned by the Warren Commission, and these additional accounts provided new perspectives on the events of November 22nd. However, the reliability of witness testimony, particularly memories recalled years or decades after the fact, remains a significant challenge for researchers. Some witnesses have changed their accounts over time, either adding new details or modifying their original statements. These changes have been interpreted differently by various researchers, with some seeing them as evidence of intimidation or pressure to conform to the official narrative, while others view them as natural consequences of the fallibility of human memory and the influence of subsequent information. The role of the media in shaping public perception of the assassination cannot be overlooked. The immediate coverage of the events in Dallas was necessarily chaotic and incomplete, with reporters struggling to piece together what had happened from fragmentary and sometimes contradictory information. Some early reports included details that were later proven false, but these initial accounts influenced how the public understood the events. Television coverage of the assassination and its aftermath created a shared national experience that was unprecedented in American history. The continuous coverage, from the initial reports of the shooting through the funeral procession, kept the entire nation focused on the story for 4 days. This intense media attention also meant that every detail was scrutinized and analyzed in real time, creating opportunities for inconsistencies and contradictions to be noticed and questioned. The famous footage of Jack Ruby shooting Oswald was broadcast live on television, creating another unprecedented moment in American media history. This dramatic event, occurring while Oswald was in police custody and supposedly under protection, immediately raised questions about how Ruby had been able to access the basement of the police station and whether his actions were spontaneous or planned. Ruby's background and connections became the subject of immediate investigation and long-term speculation. His ownership of nightclubs in Dallas brought him into contact with various underworld figures, though the significance of these connections has been debated. The Warren Commission concluded that Ruby acted alone and impulsively, motivated by grief and anger over the president's death. However, critics have argued that Ruby's actions were part of a larger conspiracy to silence Oswald before he could reveal information about other conspirators. The investigation into Ruby's finances revealed that he had been experiencing financial difficulties before the assassination, owing substantial amounts to the Internal Revenue Service and other creditors. Some researchers have suggested that Ruby might have been paid to kill Oswald, though no evidence of such payment has been definitively established. The House Select Committee on Assassinations found that Ruby had more extensive connections to organized crime figures than the Warren Commission had acknowledged, but it could not establish that these connections were related to the assassination. Ruby's own statements about his motivations were contradictory and sometimes confusing. He claimed at various times that he had acted to spare Mrs. Kennedy the ordeal of a trial, that he had been overcome by emotion, and that he had been part of a conspiracy. His mental state deteriorated while he was in custody, and he died of cancer in 1967 while his conviction was being appealed. The international reaction to the Kennedy assassination also influenced how conspiracy theories developed. Foreign observers, particularly in countries with experience of political assassination and coup attempts, were often more skeptical of the lone gunman explanation than American officials expected. Some foreign intelligence services conducted their own investigations into the assassination, though the results of these investigations were not shared with American authorities. The Soviet Union's response to the assassination was particularly important given Oswald's connections to that country. Soviet leaders were apparently genuinely concerned that they might be blamed for the president's death, which could have led to a military confrontation with the United States. KGB files that became available after the end of the Cold War revealed that Soviet intelligence had monitored Oswald during his time in the USSR, but had concluded that he was unstable and unsuitable for intelligence work. The Cuban government also conducted its own investigation into the assassination, partly out of concern that anti-Castro groups might be blamed for the president's death. Fidel Castro reportedly spent considerable time studying the available evidence and concluded that the assassination was likely the result of a domestic American conspiracy rather than foreign involvement. These international perspectives added another dimension to the conspiracy theories that developed around the assassination. The fact that foreign governments were conducting their own investigations and reaching different conclusions than American authorities suggested to some observers that the official American investigation might be incomplete or biased. The technological limitations of 1963 have been an important factor in the ongoing debate about the assassination. Forensic techniques that are routine today were either unavailable or in their infancy when the Warren Commission conducted its investigation. DNA analysis, advanced ballistics testing, sophisticated audio analysis, and digital enhancement of photographs were all decades away from development. This technological gap has created opportunities for reanalysis of the evidence using modern techniques, but it has also meant that some potentially crucial evidence was not preserved in ways that would allow for current analysis. The handling of physical evidence in 1963 did not always meet the standards that would be required for a forensic investigation today, partly because those standards had not yet been developed. The evolution of conspiracy theories about the Kennedy assassination reflects broader changes in American society and culture over the past 60 years. The theories that emerged in the 1960s focused primarily on the possibility of a second gunman or the involvement of anti-Castro Cubans. By the 1970s, as revelations about CIA activities and government secrecy became public, theories began to incorporate suggestions of involvement by intelligence agencies. The 1980s and 1990s saw the development of more elaborate theories involving multiple conspirators and complex cover-ups. The rise of the Internet in the late 1990s and 2000s enabled conspiracy researchers to share information more easily and to collaborate on analysis of evidence. This technological change also made it possible for conspiracy theories to spread more rapidly and to reach larger audiences. The psychological appeal of conspiracy theories has been studied extensively by researchers interested in understanding why certain explanations for events gain traction while others do not. The Kennedy assassination conspiracy theories exhibit many of the characteristics that psychologists have identified as typical of such theories. They provide simple explanations for complex events, they assign blame to powerful and secretive groups, and they suggest that important information is being hidden from the public. However, dismissing all alternative theories about the assassination as merely psychological phenomena would be an oversimplification. Some of the questions raised by conspiracy researchers have led to genuine discoveries of government secrecy and deception in other areas. The investigations into the Kennedy assassination helped expose the CIA's involvement in assassination plots against foreign leaders, the FBI's domestic surveillance programs, and other government activities that had been hidden from public scrutiny. The credibility of conspiracy theories has been both enhanced and undermined by subsequent revelations about government activities. The disclosure of programs like COINTELPRO, MKUltra, and various assassination plots has demonstrated that government agencies were indeed capable of the kind of secretive and illegal activities that conspiracy theorists had alleged. However, these same revelations have also shown that such activities typically left extensive documentary trails that would be difficult to conceal permanently. The relationship between conspiracy theories and democratic governance is complex and sometimes contradictory. On one hand, conspiracy theories can serve as a check on government power by encouraging citizens to question official explanations and demand transparency. The investigations sparked by assassination conspiracy theories have led to important reforms in intelligence oversight and government accountability. On the other hand, conspiracy theories can also undermine democratic institutions by encouraging distrust and cynicism that make effective governance more difficult. When citizens lose faith in their government's ability to tell the truth about important events, they may become less willing to participate in democratic processes or to support necessary government functions. The Kennedy assassination conspiracy theories have influenced American political culture in ways that extend far beyond the specific question of what happened in Dallas. They helped establish a template for questioning official explanations of major events, a pattern that has been repeated with subsequent controversies ranging from the September 11 attacks to various political scandals. The research methodologies developed by assassination investigators have also influenced other fields. The frame-by-frame analysis of the Zapruder film pioneered techniques that are now used in analyzing surveillance footage and other visual evidence. The acoustic analysis methods developed for studying the Dallas police recordings have been applied to other audio evidence in criminal cases. The legal implications of the assassination investigation have been significant as well. The Warren Commission's procedures and conclusions have been studied extensively by legal scholars, leading to reforms in how government investigations are conducted and how evidence is preserved and analyzed. The House Select Committee on Assassinations adopted more rigorous standards for evidence evaluation, partly in response to criticisms of the Warren Commission's methodology. The scientific community has also been influenced by the assassination investigation. The ballistics testing, medical analysis, and acoustic studies conducted for various investigations have contributed to the development of forensic science as a discipline. The challenges encountered in analyzing the assassination evidence have helped identify the limitations of various forensic techniques and the importance of proper evidence handling and documentation. The cultural impact of the assassination extends into literature, film, and popular culture, in ways that have helped keep conspiracy theories alive in the public consciousness. Books, movies, and television programs about the assassination have introduced new generations to the controversies surrounding the case and have sometimes presented speculative theories as established facts. The artistic interpretations of the assassination have often focused on the emotional and symbolic aspects of the event, rather than the technical details of the evidence. This artistic treatment has helped maintain public interest in the case, but has also contributed to the blurring of lines between fact and speculation that characterizes much of the discussion about the assassination. The educational implications of the assassination conspiracy theories are also significant. The case has been used in schools and universities to teach critical thinking skills, research methodology, and the evaluation of evidence. Students studying the assassination learn to analyze primary sources, evaluate conflicting accounts, and understand the challenges involved in reconstructing historical events. However, the complexity of the case and the persistence of unresolved questions also make it a challenging subject for educators. Teaching about the assassination requires balancing respect for the victims and their families with honest acknowledgement of the legitimate questions that remain unanswered. It also requires helping students distinguish between reasonable skepticism and unfounded speculation. The ongoing release of classified documents related to the assassination continues to provide new material for researchers and theorists. Each new batch of documents is scrutinized intensively for clues that might resolve outstanding questions or support particular theories. However, these releases have generally provided additional details about the investigation process rather than definitive answers about what happened in Dallas. The 2025 document release, prompted by decades of public pressure and legislative requirements, has followed this same pattern. While the documents have revealed new information about government surveillance activities and investigative procedures, they have not resolved the fundamental questions that have driven conspiracy theories for over 60 years. As we move forward through this exploration, we continue to see how the Kennedy assassination serves as a lens through which we can examine broader questions about truth, evidence, and the relationship between citizens and their government. The conspiracy theories that have surrounded this case for over 6 decades reflect not just the specific circumstances of November 22, 1963, but also enduring concerns about power, secrecy, and accountability in democratic societies. The search for answers about what really happened in Dallas continues to attract researchers, investigators, and curious citizens from around the world. While definitive answers may remain elusive, the process of searching for those answers has revealed important truths about how evidence is evaluated, how narratives are constructed, and how societies process traumatic events that challenge their understanding of reality. Tonight, as we continue this gentle journey through one of history's most enduring mysteries, we're reminded that sometimes the questions we ask are as important as the answers we find. The Kennedy assassination conspiracy theories have kept alive crucial conversations about government transparency, the nature of evidence, and the responsibilities of citizenship in a democratic society. Whether or not these theories ultimately prove correct, they have served an important function in encouraging citizens to think critically about official explanations and to demand accountability from their leaders. The Warren Commission, established just 1 week after the assassination, was tasked with investigating what had happened and providing definitive answers to a grieving nation. Led by Chief Justice Earl Warren, The commission included prominent figures like future President Gerald Ford, Senator Richard Russell, and former CIA Director Allen Dulles. The inclusion of Dulles on the commission would later become a source of controversy, given the CIA's contentious relationship with Kennedy and the inherent conflict of interest in having the intelligence community investigate itself. The commission's work was conducted under intense time pressure and public scrutiny. President Johnson had made it clear that he wanted the investigation completed quickly to restore public confidence and dispel rumors of a broader conspiracy. This urgency, while understandable from a political perspective, may have contributed to some of the methodological shortcuts that critics would later identify in the commission's work. The commission interviewed over 550 witnesses and reviewed thousands of documents, photographs, and other pieces of evidence. However, the process was not without its problems. Some key witnesses were never interviewed, while others gave testimony that contradicted the commission's eventual conclusions. The commission also relied heavily on information provided by the FBI and CIA, agencies that had their own institutional interests in shaping the narrative of what had happened. One of the most significant challenges the commission faced was the complexity of the ballistics evidence. The trajectory analysis required to support the single bullet theory involved precise calculations based on the positions of President Kennedy and Governor Connally in the limousine, the angle of the shots, and the timing of the impacts. These calculations were complicated by the fact that the limousine had been cleaned and repaired before detailed forensic examination could be conducted. The commission's recreation of the shooting scenario involved positioning stand-ins in a limousine at the same location in Dealey Plaza and having marksmen fire shots from the 6th floor of the Texas School Book Depository. These tests were designed to determine whether the shots described in the official account were feasible, but critics have argued that the test conditions did not adequately replicate the circumstances of the actual assassination. The medical evidence presented particular challenges for the commission. The autopsy had been conducted under less than ideal conditions, with pressure from government officials to complete the procedure quickly. The pathologists who performed the autopsy were military doctors with limited experience in forensic pathology, particularly in cases involving high-velocity rifle wounds. The autopsy photographs and X-rays were not made available to the commission members themselves, who had to rely on artists' drawings and written descriptions of the wounds. This limitation has been cited by critics as a fundamental flaw in the commission's investigation. The actual photographs and X-rays were not released for public examination until many years later, and when they were finally made available, they generated new controversies rather than settling existing ones. The commission's treatment of witness testimony also became a source of criticism. Some witnesses reported hearing shots from directions other than the book depository, seeing suspicious individuals in the area, or observing other details that didn't fit neatly into the single gunman narrative. While the commission acknowledged these testimonies, it often dismissed them as mistaken or irrelevant to the central question of who killed the president. The psychological pressure on witnesses cannot be underestimated. Many people who were in Dealey Plaza that day were traumatized by what they had witnessed, and their memories may have been affected by the shock of the event. Additionally, as time passed and the official narrative became established, some witnesses may have unconsciously modified their recollections to conform to what they believed they were supposed to have seen. The commission's final report, published in September 1964, concluded that Lee Harvey Oswald had acted alone in killing President Kennedy, and that there was no evidence of a conspiracy. The report was comprehensive, running to 888 pages with 26 volumes of supporting evidence and testimony. However, even some members of the commission had private doubts about certain aspects of the investigation. Senator Richard Russell, one of the commission members, reportedly disagreed with the single bullet theory but was persuaded to sign the final report in the interest of presenting a united front. This internal disagreement, which did not become public until years later, has been cited by critics as evidence that even the commission members were not entirely convinced by their own conclusions. The release of the Warren Report was accompanied by a massive public relations effort designed to convince the American people that the investigation had been thorough and that the conclusions were definitive. Government officials appeared on television and radio programs to explain the findings, and the full report was made available to the public through government printing offices and commercial publishers. Initially, the public response to the Warren Report was largely positive. Polls showed that most Americans accepted the Commission's conclusions, and there was a sense of relief that the investigation had been completed and the questions answered. However, this acceptance would prove to be temporary as critics began to examine the report in detail and identify what they saw as significant flaws in the investigation. The first major criticism of the Warren Report came from Mark Lane, a New York attorney who had attempted to represent Lee Harvey Oswald's interests before the Commission. Lane's book, Rush to Judgment, published in 1966, systematically challenged many of the Commission's conclusions and highlighted inconsistencies in the evidence. The book became a bestseller and helped launch what would become a cottage industry of assassination research and criticism. Edward J. Epstein's Inquest, also published in 1966, took a different approach by examining the Commission's investigative methodology rather than focusing primarily on the evidence itself. Epstein interviewed several Commission staff members and revealed that there had been significant internal disagreements about various aspects of the investigation that were not reflected in the final report. These early critiques opened the floodgates for a wave of alternative theories about what had happened in Dallas. Books, articles, and documentaries began to appear regularly, each proposing different explanations for the assassination and challenging different aspects of the official investigation. Some of these works were carefully researched and raised legitimate questions about the evidence, while others were more speculative and sensationalistic. The proliferation of alternative theories created a confusing landscape for the general public. With so many different explanations being proposed, it became difficult for ordinary citizens to evaluate which theories were credible and which were based on flawed reasoning or incomplete information. This confusion was compounded by the fact that the Warren Commission's own report was dense and technical, making it challenging for non-experts to understand and evaluate. The cultural impact of these conspiracy theories extended far beyond academic debates about evidence and methodology. The Kennedy assassination became a touchstone for broader concerns about government secrecy, institutional credibility, and the relationship between citizens and their leaders. The questioning of the official narrative about the assassination became part of a larger pattern of skepticism about government explanations that characterized the late 1960s and early 1970s. The Vietnam War, the Watergate scandal, and revelations about domestic surveillance programs all contributed to a growing sense that government officials could not be trusted to tell the truth about important events. In this context, the doubts about the Kennedy assassination investigation seemed like part of a larger pattern of official deception rather than isolated concerns about a single case. The House Select Committee on Assassinations, established in 1976, represented an attempt to address these concerns through a new, more thorough investigation. The committee was given broader authority than the Warren Commission and access to advanced analytical techniques that had not been available in the 1960s. The committee also operated in a more open manner, with public hearings and greater transparency about its investigative methods. The committee's work was not without controversy, however. Internal disputes among staff members led to resignations and public disagreements about the direction of the investigation. The committee also faced political pressure from members of Congress who were concerned about the costs and duration of the investigation, as well as from government agencies that were reluctant to cooperate with yet another inquiry into their activities. The committee's final report, published in 1979, reached conclusions that were both similar to and different from those of the Warren Commission. Like the earlier investigation, the committee concluded that Lee Harvey Oswald had fired the shots that killed President Kennedy. However, the committee also concluded that there was a high probability that a conspiracy had been involved, based primarily on acoustic evidence suggesting a fourth shot fired from the grassy knoll. This conclusion that there had probably been a conspiracy was unprecedented for an official government investigation. However, the committee was unable to identify the other conspirators or determine the nature of the conspiracy. This limitation meant that while the committee's work lent credibility to conspiracy theories in general, it did not provide support for any specific alternative explanation of what had happened. The acoustic evidence that formed the basis for the committee's conspiracy conclusion was itself controversial. The analysis was based on a police radio recording that allegedly captured the sounds of gunshots being fired in Dealey Plaza. However, the recording was of poor quality, and the interpretation of the sounds required sophisticated technical analysis that was subject to different interpretations. Later reanalysis of the acoustic evidence by other experts reached different conclusions, with some researchers arguing that the sounds on the recording were not gunshots at all, but rather other noises that occurred after the assassination. This ongoing debate about the acoustic evidence illustrates the challenges involved in analyzing technical evidence from historical events, particularly when that evidence is of marginal quality. The committee's investigation also revealed new information about government surveillance of various individuals and groups that had not been available to the Warren Commission. This information included details about FBI and CIA monitoring of Lee Harvey Oswald, as well as surveillance of various Cuban exile groups and organized crime figures who had been suspected of possible involvement in the assassination. While this new information did not definitively prove the existence of a conspiracy, it did demonstrate that the government had more information about potential conspirators than had previously been acknowledged. This revelation fueled additional speculation about what other information might still be classified and whether complete transparency about the assassination would ever be achieved. The release of previously classified documents has continued in waves over the decades since the House Select Committee completed its work. Each new release has been scrutinized intensively by researchers looking for clues that might resolve outstanding questions or support particular theories about what happened. However, these releases have generally followed a pattern of providing additional details about the investigative process without resolving the fundamental questions that have driven conspiracy theories. The documents often reveal the mundane realities of government bureaucracy. Memos about administrative procedures, reports on routine surveillance activities, and correspondence between agencies about jurisdictional issues. While these materials provide valuable insights into how government agencies operated during the 1960s, they rarely contain the smoking gun evidence that conspiracy theorists hope to find. The classification and subsequent release of documents related to the assassination has itself become a subject of controversy. Critics have argued that the government's continued withholding of certain materials, even decades after the event, suggests that there are still secrets to be hidden. Supporters of the official investigation contend that the classified materials are being withheld to protect intelligence sources and methods rather than to conceal evidence of a conspiracy. The John F. Kennedy Assassination Records Collection Act, passed by Congress in 1992, established a systematic process for reviewing and releasing assassination-related documents. The act created a review board with the authority to determine which documents should be released and which should remain classified. The board's work resulted in the release of millions of pages of previously classified materials, though some documents remained partially or completely redacted. The 25-year deadline established by the Act for the release of all remaining documents has been extended several times, most recently leading to the 2025 release that has generated renewed interest in the case. Each extension has been justified by claims that releasing certain materials would harm national security or compromise ongoing intelligence operations. Though critics have questioned whether such concerns are legitimate more than 60 years after the assassination, the Internet age has dramatically transformed how assassination research is conducted and how theories are developed and disseminated. Online forums and websites dedicated to the case allow researchers from around the world to collaborate on analysis of evidence and to share findings instantly. This global network of researchers has accelerated the pace of investigation while also making it more difficult to control the flow of information. Digital technology has also enabled new forms of analysis of existing evidence. High-resolution scanning of photographs has revealed details that were not visible in earlier reproductions. Digital enhancement of the Zapruder film has allowed for frame-by-frame analysis that was not possible with analog technology. Computer modeling has enabled more sophisticated trajectory analysis and ballistics testing. However, these technological advances have also created new opportunities for error and misinterpretation. Digital enhancement can introduce artifacts that may be mistaken for evidence. computer models are only as accurate as the assumptions built into them. The democratization of analytical tools has made it possible for amateur researchers to conduct sophisticated analysis, but it has also made it easier for flawed or misleading research to appear credible. The social media age has further accelerated the spread of both information and misinformation about the assassination. Platforms like Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube have made it possible for anyone to share theories and evidence with potentially millions of people. This has led to the rapid dissemination of new discoveries and insights, but it has also facilitated the spread of false or misleading information. The challenge of distinguishing between credible research and unfounded speculation has become more difficult in this environment. The traditional gatekeeping functions of publishers, editors, and peer review have been bypassed by social media platforms that prioritize engagement over accuracy. This has created a situation where well-researched analysis may receive the same level of attention as wild speculation, making it difficult for the public to evaluate the credibility of different claims. The psychological appeal of conspiracy theories in the digital age has been enhanced by the ability of like-minded individuals to find each other online and reinforce each other's beliefs. Echo chambers and confirmation bias, which have always been challenges in conspiracy research, have been amplified by algorithms that show users content similar to what they have previously engaged with. The Kennedy assassination continues to serve as a template for conspiracy theories about other major events. The patterns of reasoning, the types of evidence that are emphasized or dismissed, and the explanatory frameworks that have been developed for understanding the assassination have been applied to everything from the September 11 attacks to various political scandals. This template includes several common elements: skepticism about official explanations, emphasis on anomalous or unexplained evidence, suggestions of cover-ups by powerful institutions, and the proposal of alternative narratives that implicate hidden conspirators. While these elements can sometimes lead to legitimate discoveries of government wrongdoing, they can also lead to unfounded speculation when applied uncritically. The educational value of studying assassination conspiracy theories lies partly in learning to distinguish between these two outcomes. Students of the case can develop critical thinking skills by learning to evaluate evidence, assess the credibility of sources, and understand the difference between legitimate skepticism and unfounded conspiracy thinking. The case also provides insights into how historical narratives are constructed and how they evolve over time. The official account of the assassination has remained relatively stable since the Warren Commission's report, but alternative narratives have continued to develop and change as new information has become available and as cultural contexts have shifted. Understanding how these narratives have developed can help us better understand how societies process traumatic events and how collective memory is shaped by political, cultural, and psychological factors. The Kennedy assassination represents a case study in how the same set of events can be interpreted in radically different ways, depending on the assumptions, biases, and methodologies that investigators bring to their analysis. The international dimension of assassination research has also evolved significantly over the decades. Researchers in other countries have brought different perspectives and methodologies to the analysis of the evidence, sometimes reaching different conclusions than their American counterparts. Foreign intelligence agencies have declassified some of their own materials related to the assassination, providing additional sources of information for researchers. The global nature of conspiracy theories about the assassination reflects broader patterns in how information flows across national boundaries in the modern world. Theories developed in one country can quickly spread to others through books, documentaries, and internet communications. This global circulation of ideas has enriched assassination research by bringing diverse perspectives to bear on the evidence, but it has also facilitated the spread of misinformation and unfounded speculation. The Kennedy assassination has also influenced how subsequent investigations of major events are conducted. The criticisms of the Warren Commission's methodology led to reforms in how government investigations are structured and how evidence is preserved and analyzed. The emphasis on transparency and public access to information that characterized the House Select Committee's work has become a model for other investigations. However, the persistence of conspiracy theories about the assassination, despite multiple official investigations, has also demonstrated the limitations of government inquiries in resolving public doubts about controversial events. The fact that two major investigations reached different conclusions about whether a conspiracy was involved has actually fueled rather than quieted conspiracy theories. This paradox highlights one of the fundamental challenges in addressing conspiracy theories through official investigations. The very fact that an investigation is conducted by government agencies can make its conclusions suspect to those who believe that government agencies were involved in the events being investigated. This credibility gap cannot be easily bridged through improved methodology or greater transparency alone. The role of expert testimony in shaping public understanding of the assassination has also evolved over time. In the 1960s, the public relied primarily on government officials and mainstream media for information about the investigation. Today, a wide range of experts from various fields regularly offer their opinions about different aspects of the case through books, documentaries, and online platforms. This proliferation of expert voices has provided the public with access to more diverse perspectives on the evidence. But it has also created confusion about which experts are most credible and which opinions are most reliable. The public is often left to choose between conflicting expert opinions without having the technical knowledge necessary to evaluate the quality of different analyses. The forensic science community has used the Kennedy assassination as a case study for developing and testing new analytical techniques. The case has contributed to advances in ballistics analysis, medical forensics, acoustic analysis, and photographic interpretation. However, the application of new techniques to old evidence has sometimes raised more questions than it has answered, as different analytical approaches have yielded different results. The legal implications of the assassination investigation continue to influence how criminal cases are handled today. The chain of custody issues that plagued the Kennedy investigation led to stricter protocols for evidence handling. The problems with the autopsy led to reforms in forensic pathology practices. The issues with witness testimony led to improved techniques for interviewing witnesses and preserving their accounts. However, the Kennedy case also demonstrates the limitations of applying modern forensic standards to historical events. Evidence that might be crucial to resolving questions about the assassination was not preserved according to current standards, because those standards had not yet been developed. This creates an inherent challenge in any attempt to definitively resolve historical mysteries using contemporary analytical techniques. The cultural legacy of the Kennedy assassination extends far beyond the specific questions about what happened in Dallas. The event has become a symbol of lost innocence, government secrecy, and the fragility of democratic institutions. These symbolic meanings have influenced how the assassination is remembered and discussed, sometimes overwhelming the factual questions about what actually occurred. The assassination has also become a touchstone for broader debates about the nature of truth and evidence in a complex world. The persistence of multiple competing explanations for the same event illustrates the challenges involved in establishing definitive truth about complex historical events. This has implications that extend far beyond the specific case of the Kennedy assassination to questions about how societies determine truth and how they respond to uncertainty and ambiguity. As we continue to examine this enduring mystery, we see how it reflects fundamental questions about power, knowledge, and belief that are as relevant today as they were in 1963. The search for truth about what happened in Dallas has become inseparable from larger questions about how truth is determined, who has the authority to establish official narratives, and what happens when those narratives are challenged by persistent doubts and alternative explanations. The Kennedy assassination conspiracy theories have created a template for understanding how societies process traumatic events that challenge their basic assumptions about how the world works. The patterns of belief, doubt, and investigation that have characterized this case provide insights into human psychology, social dynamics, and political culture that extend far beyond the specific questions about what happened on November 22, 1963. Tonight, as we move deeper into this exploration, we continue to see how the search for answers about the past illuminates enduring questions about the present. The mystery of the Kennedy assassination serves as a mirror reflecting our ongoing struggles with uncertainty, authority, and the elusive nature of truth itself in a complex and often confusing world. As we reach the conclusion of our gentle journey through this labyrinth of evidence and enduring questions, we find ourselves not with definitive answers, but with something perhaps more valuable: a deeper understanding of how truth and mystery intertwine in the fabric of human experience. The story of November 22, 1963, continues to evolve with each passing year, each newly released document, each fresh perspective brought to bear on the evidence. The 2025 document release has added new threads to this complex tapestry, revealing previously hidden details about surveillance activities and investigative procedures, while simultaneously raising new questions that future researchers will undoubtedly pursue with the same passion and dedication that has characterized this field for over 6 decades. What we've discovered tonight is that the Kennedy assassination represents something far more significant than a single historical event. It has become a lens through which we examine the relationship between citizens and their government, the nature of truth and evidence, and the human need to make sense of events that seem to defy simple explanation. The conspiracy theories that have flourished around this case aren't merely the product of paranoid thinking or deliberate misinformation. They emerge from genuine inconsistencies in the evidence, from legitimate questions about the investigative process, and from a healthy democratic impulse to hold powerful institutions accountable for their actions. The persistence of these theories, despite multiple official investigations and decades of analysis, tells us something important about the complexity of truth itself. In our modern world, we often expect clear, definitive answers to our questions. We want the comfort of certainty, the reassurance that comes from knowing exactly what happened and why. But the Kennedy assassination reminds us that sometimes the most important events resist such simple categorization. Sometimes the search for truth reveals not a single, clear narrative, but a complex web of possibilities that challenge our understanding and force us to grapple with ambiguity. This doesn't mean that all theories are equally valid, or that we should abandon the effort to distinguish between credible research and unfounded speculation. The tools of critical thinking, careful analysis, and rigorous methodology remain essential for evaluating evidence and reaching reasonable conclusions. But it does mean that we must remain humble in the face of complexity and open to the possibility that our understanding of events may be incomplete or imperfect. The technological advances that have allowed for increasingly sophisticated analysis of the assassination evidence have also highlighted the limitations of our analytical tools. Computer models can reconstruct bullet trajectories with remarkable precision, but they depend on assumptions about variables that may not be precisely known. Digital enhancement can reveal previously invisible details in photographs, but it can also introduce artifacts that may be misinterpreted. Acoustic analysis can detect sounds that were previously inaudible, but determining what those sounds actually represent requires subjective judgment. These limitations don't invalidate the analytical work that has been done, but they do remind us that even our most advanced tools for understanding the past have boundaries. The Kennedy assassination, with its wealth of evidence and decades of analysis, represents perhaps the most thoroughly investigated event in modern history. Yet fundamental questions remain unanswered, suggesting that some mysteries may be inherently resistant to complete resolution. The cultural impact of the assassination conspiracy theories extends far beyond their specific claims about what happened in Dallas. They have influenced how Americans think about their government, their media, and their understanding of historical truth. The skepticism toward official explanations that these theories represent has become a permanent feature of American political culture, shaping public responses to everything from foreign policy decisions to domestic surveillance programs. This skepticism can serve important democratic functions by encouraging citizens to demand transparency and accountability from their leaders. But it can also create challenges for effective governance when it evolves into a general distrust of all institutional authority. The Kennedy assassination conspiracy theories have contributed to both outcomes, demonstrating the complex relationship between healthy skepticism and destructive cynicism in democratic societies. The international dimension of assassination research has revealed how different cultural contexts can shape the interpretation of the same evidence. Researchers from countries with different political systems and historical experiences have sometimes reached different conclusions about the significance of various pieces of evidence. This diversity of perspectives has enriched our understanding of the case, while also highlighting how cultural and political factors can influence even seemingly objective analysis. The evolution of conspiracy theories about the assassination reflects broader changes in American society over the past 60 years. The theories that emerged in the 1960s were shaped by the political and cultural context of that era, including the Cold War, the Civil Rights Movement, and growing awareness of government secrecy. Later theories have incorporated new concerns about corporate power, media manipulation, and technological surveillance, demonstrating how conspiracy theories adapt to changing social anxieties. The role of the internet and social media in shaping contemporary discussion of the assassination has been both beneficial and problematic. These platforms have enabled unprecedented collaboration among researchers and have made vast amounts of information accessible to anyone with an internet connection. However, they have also facilitated the spread of misinformation and have created echo chambers that can reinforce unfounded beliefs while isolating people from contradictory evidence. The educational value of studying the Kennedy assassination extends far beyond the specific questions about what happened in Dallas. The case provides an excellent opportunity to develop critical thinking skills, to learn how to evaluate competing claims and evidence, and to understand the challenges involved in reconstructing complex historical events. Students who engage seriously with assassination research learn to distinguish between different types of evidence, to assess the credibility of sources, and to understand how personal and institutional biases can influence analysis. The case also illustrates important lessons about the nature of historical knowledge itself. History is not simply a collection of facts waiting to be discovered, but a continuous process of interpretation and reinterpretation based on available evidence and changing perspectives. The Kennedy assassination demonstrates how new evidence can reshape our understanding of past events and how different analytical approaches can yield different insights into the same set of facts. The psychological dimensions of conspiracy theories about the assassination reveal important truths about human nature and the ways we process traumatic events. The need to find meaning in tragedy, the tendency to see patterns in random events, and the desire to assign blame for incomprehensible losses are all natural human responses that help explain the appeal of conspiracy theories. Understanding these psychological factors doesn't invalidate all alternative theories about the assassination, but it does help us approach them with appropriate skepticism and awareness of our own cognitive biases. The forensic legacy of the assassination investigation has contributed significantly to the development of modern investigative techniques. The challenges encountered in analyzing the Dallas evidence have led to improvements in ballistics testing, medical forensics, photographic analysis, and evidence preservation. Future criminal investigations have benefited from the lessons learned during the various assassination inquiries, even as new technologies continue to create new possibilities and new challenges for forensic analysis. The legal implications of the assassination case continue to influence how major criminal investigations are conducted. The problems identified in the Warren Commission's methodology have led to reforms in how evidence is collected and preserved, how witnesses are interviewed, and how expert testimony is evaluated. The emphasis on transparency and public access to information that characterized the House Select Committee's work has become a model for other high-profile investigations. However, the Kennedy case has also demonstrated the limitations of legal and investigative procedures when applied to events of enormous political and cultural significance. The fact that multiple official investigations have reached different conclusions about fundamental questions has highlighted the challenges involved in achieving definitive resolution of controversial cases through traditional investigative methods. The media's role in shaping public understanding of the assassination has evolved dramatically over the decades. The initial television coverage of the events in Dallas created a shared national experience that influenced how Americans process the trauma of losing their president. Later media coverage of the various investigations and conspiracy theories has continued to shape public opinion, sometimes in ways that have prioritized entertainment value over factual accuracy. The rise of documentary filmmaking as a medium for exploring historical controversies has been particularly significant in the case of the Kennedy assassination. Films like Oliver Stone's JFK have brought assassination theories to mainstream audiences while taking significant creative liberties with the historical record. These productions have increased public awareness of alternative theories while also contributing to confusion about what is established fact and what is speculation or artistic interpretation. The global reach of assassination conspiracy theories has been facilitated by the international distribution of books, films, and internet content about the case. Researchers and theorists from around the world have contributed to the ongoing discussion, bringing different perspectives and methodologies to bear on the evidence. This international dimension has enriched assassination research while also demonstrating how conspiracy theories can transcend national boundaries and cultural differences. The commercial aspects of assassination research have created both opportunities and challenges for serious investigators. The public's continued fascination with the case has created a market for books, documentaries, and other products related to the assassination, providing financial incentives for continued research and analysis. However, this same market has also created incentives for sensationalistic claims and unfounded speculation that can muddy the waters of legitimate investigation. The scientific community's engagement with assassination research has contributed to advances in various analytical disciplines, while also highlighting the challenges involved in applying scientific methods to historical questions. The case has served as a testing ground for new forensic techniques and has provided opportunities to refine existing methodologies. However, the application of scientific analysis to the assassination evidence has also demonstrated the limitations of scientific approaches when dealing with incomplete or ambiguous data. The political implications of assassination conspiracy theories have extended far beyond questions about what happened in Dallas. These theories have influenced how Americans think about their government's credibility, the role of intelligence agencies, and the possibility of official cover-ups in other areas. The patterns of reasoning developed in assassination research have been applied to other controversial events, creating a template for conspiracy thinking that continues to influence American political discourse. The philosophical questions raised by the assassination case touch on fundamental issues about the nature of truth, knowledge, and belief. The persistence of multiple competing explanations for the same event illustrates the challenges involved in establishing definitive truth about complex phenomena. This has implications that extend far beyond the specific case of the Kennedy assassination to broader questions about how societies determine truth and how they respond to uncertainty and disagreement. As we conclude our exploration tonight, we're reminded that the Kennedy assassination represents more than just a historical mystery. It embodies the ongoing human struggle to understand complex events, to distinguish between truth and fiction, and to maintain faith in institutions while holding them accountable for their actions. The conspiracy theories that have surrounded this case for over 60 years reflect not just the specific circumstances of November 22, 1963, but also enduring concerns about power, secrecy, and democracy that remain relevant today. The search for answers about what really happened in Dallas continues to attract new generations of researchers, each bringing fresh perspectives and new analytical tools to bear on the evidence. While definitive answers may remain elusive, the process of searching for those answers has revealed important truths about how evidence is evaluated, how narratives are constructed, and how societies process traumatic events that challenge their understanding of reality. The legacy of the Kennedy assassination extends far beyond the specific questions about who killed the president and why. It has influenced how we think about government transparency, media responsibility, and the citizen's role in a democratic society. It has contributed to advances in forensic science, investigative methodology, and historical analysis. Most importantly, it has reminded us that in a complex world, the search for truth is often more valuable than the illusion of certainty. Tonight, as you drift toward sleep, Perhaps you'll carry with you not the burden of unsolved mysteries, but the recognition that some questions are worth pursuing, even when definitive answers remain beyond our reach. The Kennedy assassination will likely continue to intrigue and challenge future generations, serving as a reminder that the most important truths are often found not in the destination, but in the journey itself. The gentle whispers of history continue to call to us from that November day in Dallas, inviting us to keep searching, keep questioning, and keep believing that truth, however elusive, is always worth pursuing. In the quiet hours when the world settles into darkness, these whispers remind us that mystery and meaning often walk hand in hand, and that sometimes the most profound discoveries come not from finding all the answers, but from learning to ask better questions. Sweet dreams, and may your rest be peaceful, knowing that tomorrow will bring new opportunities to explore, to question, and to search for truth in a world full of endless mysteries waiting to be discovered. Search for truth in a world full of endless mysteries waiting to be discovered.